When the bodies of the Heaven's Gate members who ended their lives in 1997 were discovered, one of the most arresting, most striking aspects of those images were the bright purple shrouds that covered most of the deceased members, which leads a lot of people to wonder, was there some kind of special meaning that the color purple would have had? Was there something in particular that this group was trying to communicate? Besides this, there is also the cover of the book, Heaven's Gate, How and When It May Be Entered, which is also purple. Why did Heaven's Gate seem to like the color purple so much? And there's actually two questions here that we'll want to be thinking about. What did the color purple mean to them? What did they think it would mean to us? This is something that is always very important to keep in mind when you're trying to understand why Heaven's Gate made certain choices that they did in the terminologies that they used and the icons, the iconography. A lot of the things that they did, especially when they knew it was something that was going to be consumed by the public, they had a real desire to communicate a certain kind of message to other people. What are people who are on the outside of our little worlds that we live in going to think if we say this, if we do that? So that is something that is always very important to keep in mind when you're looking at Heaven's Gate and trying to understand their rationale behind some of the things they said and some of the things they did. The mass suicide of late March 1997 is probably one of the clearest examples of Heaven's Gate doing something that was intended to send a message. I mean, that wasn't the only reason behind it, but these motivations, motives that are internal to their movement and to their belief system, often coincide with motivations to convey certain ideas to the uninitiated public. Now, to answer both of those questions, we'll want to look at two places: at how the group themselves viewed the color purple, and we'll also want to look at how other groups, other cultures, have viewed the color purple. Maybe cross-cultural meanings that are imbued, rituals and ceremonies that pertain to transitions, life to death, or perhaps from death to life. We don't really know a lot about how the various members, the various followers, viewed the color purple. Maybe some of them liked it, maybe some of them couldn't stand it, for all we know. We're not sure. But what we do know is that one of the founders of Heaven's Gate, Bonnie Nettles, the one who passed away a little over a decade prior, apparently her favorite color was purple. Some of the things that they did are not necessarily directly explainable in terms of their belief system, but rather in terms of idiosyncrasies or just things they liked. Taking of the names T and Do for Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, other way around, Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite. They both really enjoyed the sound of music. Again, actually, I think it was Nettles who really enjoyed it, and that's where the names T and Do come from. There's also, of course, the idea of the away team patches. This is a Star Trek reference. They liked Star Trek. So there are things that Heaven's Gate did that kind of just emanate from things they liked. So we might say, well, maybe they wanted to kind of pay homage to Nettles, who had passed on, in their view, already passed on to the next level by donning themselves in her favorite color and choosing her favorite color for the cover of their book. Another possibility is that kind of across various cultures, purple has symbolized something like royalty. And it makes a little bit of sense when we think about the way that they described the next level. They described it as a literal physical kingdom, albeit in outer space, but a kingdom. And so maybe there was something sort of aspirational. They aspired to go to this higher kingdom. The possibility that I think interests me the most is the Christian connection. The color purple is often used to kind of symbolize the resurrection. It is the color of the vestments that the priests wear during Lent. And as you know, may or may not be aware, the mass suicides of Heaven's Gate occurred shortly before Easter of that year. The Hale-Bopp comet was going to be at its most visible either right on Easter Sunday that year or right around that day. It might not have been the exact same day, but it was right around that time, late March, early April 1997. But all that aside, too, just the idea of the resurrection, because remember, Heaven's Gate was heavily influenced by Christianity, if not itself rather unusual iteration of a Christian sect. They were very adamant that the way to follow Christ was to do what Christ did. And what did Christ do from Heaven's Gate's perspective? He overcame his humanness and flew off in a UFO. The only person that is still around from Heaven's Gate that was even in the group right before the suicides is Rio DeAngelo, and I'm not aware of anything that he said specifically on the topic of purple and what it might have symbolized for the group. It's hard to know exactly how much he knew and how much he was privy to the specifics of their plan, just based on when he left. And you know, for one reason or another, he isn't really speaking publicly very much anymore, so we might not ever get an answer. There are other contemporary Heaven's Gate believers who were part of the group at one time, but weren't part of the group when they were really doing, you know, serious discussions of the mass suicide, and certainly were not in the market for shrouds. So as far as like sources for how to corroborate these things, I will put down below any sources that I'm pulling the information from that I'm sharing here today. But I would just kind of underscore all of it with saying that this is very speculative. We might not ever get a definite, certain answer, but I think that the possibilities that I've put forward here, Nettles likes the color purple. Purple tends to signify royalty, which correlates to the idea of them going on to belong to a kingdom, and the connotations that purple has within Christianity, specifically the death and resurrection of Christ. And that's what Heaven's Gate thought they were doing. They were going to die and be reborn in this higher kingdom. I think these are at least a few interesting possibilities to ponder as we continue to try to make sense of this fascinating topic. Until next time, thanks.